Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, University Nutrition Professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Fitness Fridays. Hey, everybody. Well, it's episode 50. That's hard to believe. Now, these are very brief episodes and admittedly done in batches in a way that I can deal with family issues and work responsibilities and still get out something here. And those of you who were around during the Iron Radio days, and a lot of you were, you know that I tended to bring nutrition news tidbits, and that's what we're really doing here. It also gives me a chance to simulcast full episodes of Iron Radio, get them back on iTunes and some other podcasting networks, just because I have more modern software now. A lot of people don't realize how I hand-coded a lot of that stuff. The website, the feed, just crazy. Anyway, modern and moving on. I do want to start with a quick email that I just got from listener Ed. He just said, Dr. Lowry, I hope you and your family are well. I'm thoroughly enjoying the podcast and have written a review. Thank you, Ed. I really appreciate that. But I fear I may have made a mistake in saying you were a former college professor. I thought you had taken employment in the private sector, but during today's podcast, you made mention of students possibly becoming co-hosts in the future, thus prompting this email. Your return to podcasting has re-energized my interest in nutrition and the science behind it. So thank you very much for taking the time and the effort to do all you do. Ed. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate that. The truth is, yes, I am an industry consultant, a science consultant for the corporate world, but I also am an adjunct professor, and occasionally motivated or superstar students, they want to get in on some of what I'm doing, and they're welcome to do that. It could be a writing project. I have a couple of those going on, or even podcasting. In fact, we had one former student of mine, Abby. You may hear from her again in the future. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get to today's topic, which is about fitness. We have a Fitness Friday. How fit is your gut microbiome? This is from the University of Calgary and then further promulgated through ScienceDaily.com. We know some of what's in this paper, that the bacteria in your large intestines change when you train, when you exercise. But this one brings some new light to it, although with some limitations. So here is a summary. It's well known that the microbiomes of athletes are different from those who are sedentary. To investigate how exercise shapes the gut microbiota in non-athletes, the study assessed self-report information, and that's what my emphasis is, the self-report part. But they did assess this self-reported information on the type, time, and intensity of exercise in relation to the microbiomes of some middle-aged adults. So the concept here is not to look at somebody who's strictly dieting and has low single-digit body fat percentage, something along those lines, but instead more typical people who self-report with sort of diet and training logs. Well, not exactly logs. There's different ways to assess self-report, but we'll get to that. Anyway, it says it's well known that the microbiomes of athletes are different from those who are sedentary. This is not overly surprising, according to the author and PhD student Shrishti Shah. Again, this is from the University of Calgary. This is a kinesiology PhD student specializing in nutrition, metabolism, and genetics. As many of you know, exercise physiology programs often are coupled with nutrition science, if you will, not always dietetics per se. So a valuable resource. Anyway, they looked at a large cohort of middle-aged adults. They gathered information on body weight, diet, and hand grip strength as well. And we'll get to that. That's sort of an interesting side note for you strength trainers. The study found that physical activity of moderate duration, so greater than 150 minutes per week, increased both the richness and diversity of the gut microbiomes compared to study participants that exercised less, says Jane Shearer, PhD, professor there, and I believe senior author on this. I suppose here is the gold nugget for Nutrition Radio listeners. When exercise intensity was examined, the results showed that how long a person exercised was more important than how hard they exercised. Now, they didn't directly assess intensity in the way that someone might do right there in the lab. Remember, this was sort of self-report. But they also point out that beneficial changes in gut microbes were seen in individuals of normal weight right? So a body mass index that is essentially below 25, and weren't overweight with a body mass index in the upper 20s. And many of you realize that's just a little calculation of weight for height. So the conclusion in this piece that's from the university and from Science Daily essentially says, with this in mind, the best advice appears to exercise more, not necessarily harder, but more, and maintain a healthy weight in order to get those changes in the bacteria in your gut. And let's not forget population specificity. These were middle-aged people. Let's dive into the full paper, though, just for a little bit of the methods, right? Because that's where the interesting nitty-gritty comes into play, and we can critique and see how it might apply to different populations or different people. So here are some of the numbers or operational definitions. Middle-aged adults, meaning 40 to 65 years of age. Again, there were 350 of them, and we kind of need big numbers like this when we're looking at observational or self-report kinds of things as opposed to direct interventions. Very helpful. Body mass index from 25 to 29.9 was considered overweight, right? And so a normal body mass index is 18.5 to 24.9. The easy way to remember, overweight is above 25 up to about 30. We start getting into obesity. Normal weight is low 20s, as far as kilograms per meter squared of height. And we should also point out that body mass index is, in fact, typically about excess body fatness, and they make some allusions to diet, poorer diet, and the overweight status. Everybody knows, especially those who exercise regularly, if you're heavily muscled, you can have a body mass index upwards of 30, literally pushing the quote-unquote obesity marker, but it's muscle mass, because this is not body composition, it's just weight for height. But again, in a general middle-aged population, that is an assumption. But by digging into the paper here for you, let me give you a little bit of background. You might find this interesting. How might this work? Like, what is the connection? What's the mechanism that gut bacteria affect other things in your body? Well, the gut microbiota, and this is from the paper, plays a major role in influencing body weight by harvesting energy from the diet. So it actually affects how much calories become available for your intestines to actually absorb and get into your bloodstream and that sort of thing. So they do play a role in harvesting energy from the diet. Imbalance in gut microbial communities, known as gut dysbiosis, is associated with inflammation, increased intestinal permeability, and this is pretty amazing, poor physical performance. Yikes. Now, the paper does say there's a consensus that high-calorie diets induce changes in the composition and the function of the gut microbiome as well by decreasing microbial diversity. And that may be an explanation, at least in part, why they didn't see some of the duration of exercise benefits in the heavier people compared to the normal weight people. Further mechanisms here, it says, in general, physical activity and or exercise modulates the gut microbiome by increasing beneficial taxa that generate metabolites such as short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. These are good things. They can be used, some of these short-chain fatty acids, as fuel right there by tissues in the intestines. They can do other things in the body as well. Not just the short-chain fatty acids, but also utilizing lactate and decreasing pathobionts. That just meaning bad guys, right? Bacteria that are harmful, at least under certain circumstances. But as you're thinking about your own weight for height, body mass index, or activity level or whatever, here's how they did this. Assessment of physical activity was done using the International Physical Activity Questionnaire, so again with a questionnaire. And in order to do this, for duration, the total time spent doing light, moderate, or vigorous exercise at home, work, or for leisure over 7 days was calculated. Low volume was less than 150 minutes a week. So that's like 3 workouts, really, if you think about 3 50-minute workouts. Moderate was 150 to 500 minutes per week, so a big range. That's 2.5 to roughly 8 hours a week. That's a lot of training. And then high was defined as more than 500 minutes per week, so more than 8 hours a week. I think that might be why they actually saw a decrease in diversity in the very high volume people, high physical activity, normal weight people. Because frankly, I think they're overdoing it. And then as far as intensity goes, they use the concepts of METs. The concept of METs is just, think about multiples of resting metabolic rate. So 1 to 3 METs is light, 4 to 6 METs, that's 4 to 6 times just basically laying there as far as metabolic rate. Again, moderate, and then vigorous is 7 to 9 METs. So these people are just self-reporting this, and they try to explain it to them by saying, mild stuff could be slow walking, standing around, watching TV. Moderate, so the 4 to 6 MET range that seem to be so beneficial for gut microbiota, brisk walking, cleaning, lawn mowing and other yard work, bicycling, sports like tennis, and then vigorous physical activity, that'd be over 6 METs. That's going to be faster, that's jogging, lifting heavy, shoveling, soccer-type games, more intense. And again, that's not really something they showed that paid off tremendously when it came to benefits to the gut. And let me just wrap up by mentioning the grip strength. They did look at the impact of grip strength also and compared it to gut microbiota. They found a higher abundance of some of the, we'll say, good guy bacteria in males with high grip strength that also had a normal body mass index. If you're the kind of person who wants to know specific names for all these different bacteria, good or bad, quote unquote, you could go check out the original article. It's FASEB, Journal Volume 37, issue number 4, 21 March 2023. And it looks like overweight females also demonstrated an increase of this particular bacterium when they had high grip strength. When I say beneficial, just to point it out here, it says that reduction in this particular bacterial population has been linked to dysbiosis. They're anti-inflammatory, again, kind of good guys, if you will. Supplementation with it in a high-fat rodent model actually increased muscle mass and fat burning, fat oxidation. So very interesting stuff here. Some of these bacteria are very hard to pronounce, but you could go check it out if you want. F. prosnitzi, I am certainly no microbiologist, but there definitely does seem to be a connection here. The paper actually says that hand grip strength has been shown to improve in the elderly following both inulin, so that's like you might get with chicory fiber. You can buy like Fiber 1 bars with chicory, that sort of thing. Or inulin/fructooligosaccharide prebiotics. So it's amazing that you could take a prebiotic, feed the right bacteria in your gut, and potentially have greater hand grip strength. Again, that's in the elderly. They speculate it may be because of things like reductions in gut leakage, systemic oxidative stress, or reduced chronic inflammation. Fascinating stuff, though, this whole concept of a gut microbiome/muscle axis. But there's a moderately deep dive to help you understand some of the methodology behind this. Again, please go look at the full paper. See if it even applies to you in any way. Do you meet some of these training and age requirements and that sort of thing of the population? We are out of time, though, so we'll see you next week. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.